Which finger holds the power to change the world? Hello, interwebs. I hope you're doing well. And after that mildly inappropriate introduction, I am here to review the first 2 episodes of Disney Plus's brand new series, Willow, the sequel TV show to the 1980s cult classic film directed by Ron Howard and executive produced by Steven Spielberg, and also starring Warwick Davis. So, I have actually been really looking forward to this show because I feel like it's the show that has kind of the most potential to do something really cool with its source material. We've been getting a girth, not sure if girth is the word that I wish to use there, but anyways, we've been getting a girth of fantasy shows lately that have been based on like well-known source materials like The Witcher, Lord of the Rings of Power, House of the Dragon based on Game of Thrones, Shadow and Bone even, you could kind of toss in there. So there's been a lot of these shows, but Willow, the original film, was a movie that I think is very fondly remembered, for very good reason, because the things that are in that movie that are really magical and sort of stick in your mind are really amazing, and I think are truly unique and special things about the film. But as a whole, the film itself never really coalesced into being something greater than the sum of its parts. To kind of get into the nitty-gritty of that, because I think I need to talk about the movie a little bit before I can talk about the show, because I think there's an interesting sort of connection between the quality of both the movie and the show. You know, I never had a big nostalgia like feel for the original film. I did have a relationship kind of with it when I was a kid. I had the like children's book version of it that I read a lot and loved the pictures of it, but I never actually watched the movie for whatever reason until literally just a few months ago. I saw it for the first time. And watching it, like I said, I can understand very much so why this movie has kind of stayed around in cultural consciousness, because the things that are magical about it are really magical and special. You can feel that sort of Spielbergian, this sort of Spielberg saccharineness to it, and you know, and I think that comes mostly from Warwick Davis himself. His performance is so wonderful. His relationship with Val Kilmer is like the roguish character. Val Kilmer in that movie is very much a delight. And then there are like small scenes like the finger scene, and a couple other moments here and there that I'm like, oh, that really is like capturing that magic of cinema sort of thing that Spielberg does so well. But then the rest of the movie just kind of becomes generic fantasy, and it's not bad. None of it's bad, but it never really draws me in a way that I'm like super engaged with it. So it's very much like I can totally see why this movie has become a cult classic, why people remember it fondly because of those moments. But I also think that it's a movie that there's a lot of room to sort of build upon it in a way that makes it more interesting than the original source material was. But also makes it kind of difficult to build upon it because it is so generic. Like, what can you do with this sort of like baseline fantasy world to make it feel like it's something special beyond the characters that inhabit it? I say all of that because it brings me into this series, because I feel like this show, having been forced to build upon that kind of generic base, has the same exact problems that the movie has. But I feel like as the show went on in these 2 episodes, it really leaned further and further upon its strengths in a way that I found to draw me in a little bit more. And I'm hoping that they're able to sort of use that to sort of invest me more in the series than the plot elements, because the plot that's here, again, isn't bad. I'm never like pointing at anything and being like, that's terrible, that's dumb, that's stupid, in a way that like maybe I would something like The Rings of Power or something like that. I say that as someone who likes The Ring of Power, but there were some things that were frustrating in that narrative. There's none of that here. But neither is there anything that's super, like, investing in this. And I think that is going to be the show's biggest hurdle. But as it stands right now, its strengths are really strong. And again, that is the characters. I've kind of been talking in like an overview here, so let me get a little bit more specific and talk about some of the shows itself. So we have 2 episodes, and I feel like the first episode was definitely the weakest because it was the one that most relied on plot and just introducing us to these characters. And the introductions were really good, but because it was really just doing a lot of setup, and the setup wasn't particularly interesting. Again, not bad, but not super interesting. It didn't draw me in as well. We meet Jade and Kit, who are kind of 2 female leads. We have Princess Kit delicate, who sort of has this burden of responsibility being the princess. And I like her kind of wanting to buck that authority a little bit. She's sort of someone's like, I don't want to take this on. And then you have Jade, who is kind of, she wants to be a little bit more traditional, but because she's a woman and she wants to be a knight, she doesn't actually fit into that tradition. And I thought that was such an interesting dynamic, that the girl who like wants to feel more like part of this tradition of this world is the one that inherently can't because of her gender, and then the girl who feels more rebellious is the one that's being asked to fit into that mold. And I think that that's really a cool place for them to be in, and I thought they bounced off of each other really well. And what I loved the most, and this is just me being a queer weirdo, I was literally watching this, I'm like, are they just gonna have all this tension between these two characters? Like, I can sense that there's some sort of romantic feeling between these two, but I thought I was just, again, it was gonna be one of those, like, coding it, and it wasn't actually gonna be made explicit. But no, they make it pretty explicit right away. And I was like, oh, I like that. And I like that the characters, being teenagers, are kind of figuring that out too. And there's no, like, sense of oppression of queerness within this world, which would be easy to do in a fantasy world, House of the Dragon. But, like, they're still not able to articulate it completely yet, because they're still figuring it out, because that's what kids are. And I like that, I like that exploration, that it's not like a stated thing, it's not something that's stigmatized, but it is something that is still being explored and understood by them. I thought that was really, really cool, and I like that the show made it clear that that's where it was heading without stating it overtly. I thought that that was really nice, actually. We also meet a couple of our other characters. I loved the prince character being this sort of like roguish dude who like kind of like likes to get with the ladies and things like that. Again, sort of being like the teenage boy, the horny teenage boy. But also you get to like care about him pretty quickly too, because when he sees his sister is in distress, he does be there for her. And it would have been, again, an easy thing to characterize him as like a kind of an asshole. But he is actually shown to be invested, and then when he gets kidnapped, that allows us to care about him, despite him being kind of like that, you know, the charmer kind of guy. Again, the characterization is pretty deft here. And I also too, on that note, I like that he's the one that gets kidnapped, and so we don't have a damsel in distress. We have a prince in distress. And we have a lot of women characters coming to his aid. I thought that that's a cool little like subversion of the normal damsel in distress trope in fantasy settings. So all of that was wonderful. We also meet the Prince Graydon. Graydon is his name. He was also really great too, because especially in episode 2, we got to see like he's not, again, it would have been easy to characterize him as an asshole or like stuck up. But he's also someone sort of dealing like, I don't want to have the pressure of this either, and maybe I can connect with someone, but I also don't want to like force this girl into this situation. Like he's very understandable and affable, and feels very open and empathetic, and I like that. I like that they just don't go the easy route with these characterizations. But all of that brings me to the plot of the series, and again, it's mostly generic. We have a vague evil that might be coming in the distance. There's some like portents of evil coming, and it kind of builds off the plot of the original movie a little bit. And then we have our characters going on a fellowship to rescue somebody and save him, and form a like group to go out and get him. And they have to go out into the wider world and discover the dangers that are out there. It's fairly beat by beat fantasy, and none of it particularly drew me in. There was no like unique element that had me like super drawn into this world. But there was one element that I was very glad that the show handled well, and that is the Enola Darren storyline, because that they set up at the beginning of the series that Enola Darren has been taken away. No one knows who she is or where she is, except for Val Kilmer's character, who, given, you know, Val Kilmer's health, he probably won't appear in the series, so that it's smart to write him out in that way. But that mystery could have easily been the dominant driving mystery of the show, and I could have seen that been like an easy choice to make. Like, who is Enola Darren? Are we gonna get her? But I like at the end of the episode, we immediately get that this like kitchen girl is actually her, because it allows us to begin investing in her as a character, because she now has an arc to go on, and we don't have this like mystery hanging over the show that we're like, ooh, are we gonna try? It allows the characters to be characters rather than mystery boxes. And, you know, to point at another show that did something similar, if we look at the Rings of Power, a lot of the problem with that show is we had a lot of mysteries going on, like who was the stranger, who was Sauron, and I won't spoil that here if you haven't seen the show, but those are sort of like big mysteries of that show that forced us to like have to question every character's motives, and allowed them to be fairly static as a result, because you couldn't really super move them forward because we didn't know who they were, and that mystery was what was driving their characterization. Whereas here, because we discover that mystery at the end of the first episode, it allows it to be there and be present and kind of be an interesting idea, but not dominate the characterization. So that when we get into episode 2, it allows the show to become much, much, much stronger. I love Enola Darren's like sort of relationship with Warwick Davis, because it kind of mirrors his relationship in the first film, with him not feeling good enough or being able to be a grand enough sorcerer, and him having to like teach that to someone else who feels much the same. I thought was I think a nice you know, continuation of the themes of the original film, and draw us into that. But on top of that, I love Warwick Davis. He is such a delight in every scene that he is. His comedy is great. His timing is wonderful. His energy is infectious. Even when he's down, like, I love the scene where he's telling his friend, like, I've made a mistake. And the guy asks him, he's like, when? He's like, in life. He's like, go to sleep. Like, it's just, like, moments like that are like, just really draw me in. And just the humor of the second episode. I really just was so glad with the second episode just drawing me in with that humor. I think it really worked. And again, it allowed me to be drawn more into the characters, where the plot was sort of not letting me down, but just being there. And I think that element of it really was exciting. You know, there's not much more to say. I could talk about like some of the other things in this, like the villains being this sort of generic orc guys, and we have the soldier who's infected and is kind of pursuing them. Again, you know, not bad, but not particularly super interesting either. But there was, I think what worked was just the magical moments and the character interactions and the just the moments between everybody. And I think if the show leans on that more and more, I think that will be definitely to its benefit. And I really hope that they're able to maybe put them in a plot that becomes a little bit more interesting over time. Because as of yet, I'm not super invested in their direction. But I am interested in them, which is one of the biggest hurdles of shows like this. So that's my thoughts on Willow. I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you like the show a lot more than I did? Like I said, I'm very up on it. I'm excited to see what's going to come next week, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching, my friends, and I hope you all live long and prosper.